Right, Ash Casey, feels like we speak a lot, which is brilliant. But for those people that are tuning in and listening, they perhaps won't know you as well as I feel I perhaps do. So, what might be nice, I guess, is to get you to share a little bit of that backstory of, in my words, it's going to be Yorkshire, Bedford, then Loughborough, but you can tell a bit more if you like. So, where's your world of and love for PE come from, and where do you find yourself now?
Well, Yorkshire was where I got my love of PE. London was where I learnt about it. Bedford, and then Yorkshire was where I taught about it. Bedford was where I taught undergraduates about it, and Loughborough is where I taught postgraduates about it. So, yeah, I taught for 15 years, wanted to teach from the age of about 15, had a place on a BEd course, 4-year, had 13 offers to go actually. And ended up doing sports science at West London Institute. Well, not sports science, even sports studies. School wasn't a strong place for me.
And I think that's an important message for people.
1 O-level, 4 GCSEs. I've got 3 A-levels. My highest grade being a D in general studies. Scraped into college, got a 2-2 in my degree. Went back up to Yorkshire, taught in my old school for 2 years. Got rejected by Loughborough to do my PGC. Went back down to London, did my PGC, West London Institute. Back up to Yorkshire for 13 years to teach. Halfway through that, stupidly decided to do a master's degree, which I was quite good at. And then I did a PhD while teaching. And then just about a month before I finished my PhD, I moved to higher education at Bedford, was there 4.5 years, and then came to Loughborough. I've been here since March 2014, so 6 years now. So.
Brilliant, exciting. I think what's nice to hear there, Ash, is from an outsider looking in, people wouldn't realise the roller coaster that you've been on. And I put myself in that box where I go, well, I didn't think academia for me. I didn't think I was bright enough to do X or to do Y. And that story...
I'm still not bright enough to do any of those things.
But that story goes to say that once you find a passion for something, actually it's that drives achievement in it, not the ambition for it.
Yeah, I didn't do PE A-level, didn't do PGCSE. I just wanted to play sport at school, and I think I fell asleep in most of my economics lessons. Not the best subject in the world for me, and in a very small, hot classroom. But I played sport, I did everything. As I said, got a U in my maths. Although if anyone ever wants to learn how to play calculator cricket in their A-level maths exam, I'm very good at it.
You figured those things out. And you talked about...
It wasn't until I did my master's where I found a passion for it. I used to love writing. I used to write short stories and stuff. I really enjoy writing, and I've often played games with my daughter when we go out walking the dog. You hear something, you have to describe, the path. You have to. So we always do that sort of stuff. So I've always enjoyed that, but then suddenly I had something to write about.
And that really comes through, doesn't it? I look at the amount that you churn. If people haven't come across your website, haven't come across your blogs, haven't come across your journal.
Use the word churn. That would be really useful.
If I didn't. No, but I use the word churn in that I can't believe the volume that you manage to of airing your thoughts and what you put through. It takes me months to come up with one blog, and my last blog was a long time ago. And I guess I'm always surprised to see how much new, novel, and interesting content you're able to push forward.
I think it's writing. I guess it doesn't frighten me. It's a way I communicate. I've communicated that for years. I mean, I have one of these, and I have under my desk I have 16 others, and this is my reflective diary, and I write it every day. So writing is something that I do. I'm most comfortable writing. I express my ideas far better in writing than I do verbally, so which is why I'm a bit annoyed that you've asked me to do this on video and not write a blog about it.
Well, the nice thing is we'll do this on video, and I'm sure it will drive some new customers to your blog. So
Customers, it's not paid, you know.
no, but and I guess that's the point, isn't it? You do it through a passion and a love of it, but it's that the journaling bit that's the probably the cathartic element of just getting it stuff down and out of your body.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when I left, I wanted to teach from a young age. I was a teacher. I love teaching. I was good at it, bad at it, indifferent at it, lazy at it, hard work at all the things that, I mean, no one's a perfect teacher, and everyone has days where they're really enthusiastic, or even years, and other years and other days, other whatever, it's harder, and there are other things going on. And, you know, to be consistently good is probably, because the level of good is probably not high enough because you're not pushing yourself. So I think we can be good at being mediocre, or, you know, we can be consistently okay, but I think if you're striving to be really good, then you have to prepare that you're going to suck.
Sometimes, yeah.
You have to be prepared to fall over. Sorry?
And take some of those risks as well. Be willing
Absolutely.
to be bad some days, that most days you're not.
So yeah, I mean, I love teaching. So, but when I left higher education, when I left secondary education, somebody said to me, I can't remember who it was. They basically said, "You've just spent 6-7 years in school, moving your curriculum away from a directive, do as I do, traditional multi-sports curriculum, to a models-based practice approach to probably half of the teaching I did." I think it's very difficult to, when you're working on your own, which I was, my colleagues were still, you know, good colleagues, but they didn't really buy into the approach as I did. So we had kind of a mixed curriculum. So, you know, the bits I controlled is where I did a lot of the innovative stuff, and I was teaching on my own. And they said, well, you're going into higher education. Universities are some of the most traditional pedagogical places you'll go to. How are you going to deal with that? And what are you going to, you know, you're not going to talk to students anymore. So what else are you going to do? So I made a decision at that point that I would try as much as possible to not become an ivory tower dwelling academic, but would try to talk to teachers. And, you know, I teach teachers. My daughter describes me as a PE teacher who teaches teachers to teach PE, and I'm happy with that.
And that passion certainly comes through. I'm just going to rewind you on two bits that I've just heard you talk about. So imagine I'm an alien and I've been beamed down to planet Earth to teach some PE. I know you write a lot of great stuff about models-based practice, but I've never heard of it. What is that? For me, the alien, in a few sentences, what's that all about?
Well, I guess we're taking, you know, our understanding of what it means to teach, to plan, to learn, to assess, using theory, probably critically informed theory and practice, you know, the movement between theory and practice, to inform the way we teach. And then with that, trying to achieve certain outcomes, not all the outcomes, but that's what, to me, models-based practice is. It's developing different approaches for the types of outcomes that we want, and not randomly choosing those, but actually using not just theoretical but empirical research and practice to inform that.
And I guess
teaching well.
Yeah, well, and that connects into the second bit that I was going to pick up on, is you used the word good teaching a few times, and I guess for you, quite often you see the use of different models, different approaches as good practice. I think all too often we see, I haven't got a problem with direct instruction as a style, as a tool that teachers use, but it becomes the default, I think, quite often, doesn't it? So I guess,
yeah, I mean, I think it's I think sometimes it's about what you value. And we often value the way that we teach because it's comfortable. It fits like, fits like an old pair of shoes. We know how to deal with it. We know that the heel is broken, but if we avoid that, then it's okay. We know it's not very good in wet weather because it's got a hole in the front, but you know what? It's really comfortable and I know what I'm going to do with it. But actually, if you go out in wet weather, you need a pair of wellies, and if you're going to for a run, you don't wear your brogues. You wear so it's that sort of process. It kind of adapting to what you need. We've all got the multi-purpose. We've got the Swiss Army knife, and I guess that to me is the pedagogy of choice. It's kind of that I can tweak a little bit here, pull out this blade, and this will happen. Or I need a screwdriver, then I can do that. But to me, it's still the same thing. It's not evolving. But if I want to teach cooperation, then I might use cooperative learning. If I want to teach personal social responsibility, I'll use a different approach. If I want to teach for understanding or for a sense of the game, I might use game-centered approaches. If I want to work with girls, I might use an activist approach. If I want to work in OAA, I might do this, or I might use there are so many different ways. But I have to know how to do that. I have to be multilingual, and that's hard.
Well, and as you say, when the chips are down and you get busy, you get back to, you resort to default, don't you? And you go back to that blunt blade that you're used to using, which is drill style in rugby or drill style.
And absolutely. And I remember in my PhD, I used actually it was a Marxist notion. I remember trying to use that once with Mikhail Kavenistat, and we had an argument over Marxism in a nice way. We always have nice arguments. But the idea was that you have your dominant, your residual, and your emerging approaches to teaching. And that's how I used it. So my dominant approach now, at the time, was probably models. That's what I was trying to do, very basically. But my residual was, command style, direct instruction. So at times of stress or times when I wanted to, and I would revert to that. And I remember teaching a unit of athletics, cooperative learning, getting quite good at just asking questions and helping kids pathfind. And across the other side of the field, there was a group doing relay. And I worked over and went, right, you're doing that wrong. You need to get... And then this switch went on my head and I went, yeah, you got that wrong, didn't you? I went, okay, I've told you you got it wrong. I can't take that back. That's what I think. But how can you, change what you're doing in order to better achieve your aims? And that was I can still see where I was stood at the time. I can still see the blurred faces of the kids, and that was a bit of a moment. And I think that was a point where the residual moved further back, the dominant became stronger, and the where I was aiming, which was to have a multi-model approach, was beginning to come into that sort of process. But always aware that kind of, an aggressive, not aggressive, but the stereotype of the PE teacher was always a little bit there, and it's hard to lose that.
So would it be fair to say that to see more good in PE across the country, across the globe, we really need to start to be more critical and spend more time thinking about the how rather than the what?
It depends on yes, would be a short answer, but it also depends on what you value. So a lot of the work I've been doing recently is thinking about cooperative learning. So let's take that as an example, because I've been doing a lot of thinking around that. So what happens if you don't teach tennis, or you don't teach ultimate frisbee, or you don't teach whatever, but you teach cooperation?
Yeah.
You read a lot of the standards and national standards, the aspirations within national curricula or within documents. You read about character education. You read about all the me's that you get, social me and all that. And these are not people, these are not tennis me or volleyball me. These are other types of student. But we tend to use something like cooperative learning as a framework for teaching sports. If we teach kids how to do athletics through cooperative learning, then they'll learn about athletics implicitly, and explicitly they'll learn about cooperation. Well, what if we flipped it? What happens if we said, right, we're going to use volleyball as a scaffolding for learning about cooperation. We're going to value cooperation. So, you see two people cooperating, but it's the middle of a really good play in volleyball or basketball. Do you praise the skill in basketball, or do you praise the cooperation? Now, if we're teaching cooperation, you praise the cooperation. You stop the game. Mid-flow, if you're watching The Last Dance and Jordan's just danced through 27 people, he's about to jump, referee's whistles goes, and you turn around to Scottie Pippen, you go, really good communication, great cooperation, fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, that's a revolutionary thing to do. Jordan's annoyed because he's the competitive kid who always wants to score. He's the best player on the team. But you know what? You're rewarding that teamwork, and it's that element that becomes more important.
It's
now, if I want to go off and teach something else, I have to apply a different approach to doing so.
Yeah, and finding that way to explicitly recognise and give feed forward about the thing that matters most, not the thing that's easy to see sometimes or easy
it's
to.
It's what you value. I've said this before, I've said this so many times, but I see the young teachers who I work with spend hours working on these worksheets, and they pour everything into it, and they really think about what's going to happen, and they take them into the room and say, right, we're going to work on this, and then they give it to the kids, and it goes on the floor. And when they go around the room, they don't refer to, right, let's pick up the sheet. All right, so tell me what you're doing here and show me what you've done and whatever. So you know what, the kids don't bother. They get on with what they want to. And then at the end of the lesson, they pick up their piece of paper and they quickly tick the 6 boxes that they need to do. And then they bring them back, and they're able to have a conversation with the teacher about what they did. Just because there's not enough time or emphasis put on the information. So to me, it's a waste of their time. So you have to, it's that, assess what you love, don't love what you assess, or value all that sort of thing. So, we have to make these things important. But it's easy to make things important that we're familiar to look for.
So I guess perhaps the emotive, the easy bit to talk about here is about your own children and the sort of physical education you want for them. If I know that you've got great awareness of what goes on around the globe and the different curricula that are followed in different countries, or that particular schools with the trainees that you work with, what would you be looking for, or how could you cherry pick perhaps from what you've seen around the globe that you think would piece together nicely to be a good curriculum for PE?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer a question about my kids, because I know all the PE staff in my kids' school.
Okay.
And the one thing that they all have is a passion for teaching. I mean, the teachers who teach my kids are brilliant. They know my kids, they look after them, they really, and that to me is the crux of stuff. So I'm not going to be talking about the curriculum there, because I would hope that the way that I designed a curriculum is different to the way you designed a curriculum, and is different to the way they would design a curriculum.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to answer that question.
Fair enough.
However, I think teaching is an ethical undertaking. And it's ethical because I have to teach to the very best of my ability at every opportunity that I can. I have to be honest with myself that, sometimes I've got to-do lists, I've got other things to do, and unfortunately I used to find often in schools that the least important thing that I had to do was teach. Or at least that's what my head of department was telling me. That's what the head of sixth form was telling me, the head of year 9, the head teacher. It's, can you give me this report? I need this. You need to do this. Can you do that? Can you do this? I need a grade on this. I need this. Okay, by the way, you've got to teach 7 periods today. Off you go. you know, we're in a situation in this country where teachers are working incredibly hard. They have very little planning time. I mean, I used to work in a school that had a 40 period a week. Yeah. It's 40-minute lessons. My first free period of the week was Monday period 1, which is the worst lesson possible to have a free period, because you've already done your planning, you're already ready. My next free lesson was Thursday period 7. And I did lunchtime practices and everything. And in the middle of that, I was trying to develop a models-based practice curriculum. I had 3 lessons that I wasn't actually teaching. So the demands of trying to do everything in that amount of time is really hard. So to me, the most important thing schools could do is value teaching. The most important thing that the government could do, or governments could do, is value teachers and teaching. Because regardless of our best intentions and our hopes and aspirations, if teachers are up against it in the manner that they are, asking them to then go and be innovative and teach well and learn a new way of teaching, which may not work for 2 years the way that they want it to, that's a big ask. I mean, we've got to have some respect for the people who work in our profession, and whether it be maths or English or PE. And we've got PE teachers out there in this country who are running, 3 lunchtime practices, 2 after-school practices. They're teaching 2 A-level groups, 2 GCSE groups, a Cambridge National group. They're marking, they don't get it's all right for you. You don't have any marking. Well, I do, but I also have to try to run this team and take them to this and do whatever. So, I think one of the pressures that teachers have is it's just the amount of work and responsibility that's put on them. And now often PE teachers now been asked to teach second subjects, and we've now got that as well. So they're learning new stuff. So if they're learning new subject matter, how are they learning new approaches? And then the schools are asking them to not teach GCSE anymore because they can't get the high enough grades they want, because now it's X amount percentage of theory and not practical. So now they're moving on to Cambridge National. So now they have to pick up a new curriculum and work out how to teach that on top of running everything else. And then we want them to go and teach differently, and it's a real challenge. So yeah, give them a break. That would be point number 1.
Give them, yeah, we'd like to be able to give them the gift of time. And I guess, to be honest, whilst there's incredible pressures on teachers at the moment, as we record this, we're sat in the middle of a pandemic with schools apparently closed. Now, we both know that still means potentially double the workload, just not face-to-face time with the same classes that the timetable said it was going to be in September. But I guess it potentially gives some people some time to be able to pause for a moment and think about how do they align that, that ethical purpose, as you said, and how do they make their everyday live out the thing that they're, got them into the profession that they're passionate about in the first place. So yeah, if you had to, if a teacher is finding themselves with some time at the moment, where would you encourage them to look or consider for change going forwards? Anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the place I didn't start was perhaps the place I should have started. And what I mean by that is I often, when I first started looking at a new approach to teaching, I decided to do it with my best groups, with my most malleable groups, so that I felt protected when I tried something different. So I chose my year 7s. I then chose my year 7s and 8s, and then my year 7s, 8s and 9s, and I kind of built the process up. So it took me 3 years or so. And a good friend of mine who was acting as a critical friend of my PhD said, sorry.
No worries.
And then
you were saying that you were building
Yeah,
up.
so a critical friend of my PhD was asked a PhD, he says, why do you always do this with the best kids? And I was kind of like, because it's easier. And then I think I wrote a blog last week about the unteachables. And this group is, 6AB that nobody wants to teach on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday afternoon. And there's one or two pupils in there who are really challenging. And what you're doing doesn't work. But you keep doing it. And it's kids' fault, you blame the kids, they don't listen, they don't respect, they don't understand, they don't do stuff. Well, what happens if you try something new? Can it actually get any worse? Can the way that they respond be any different? And can you actually work with them to do something else? Now, it's hard teaching, but it's hard teaching anyway. So I learned to use different approaches with some really nice groups of kids, but I learned more, perhaps, by trying to work on those groups that I was already finding challenging.
Take the risks where perhaps they're needed the most, but also you're already having the most problems, I guess.
Yeah, what you're doing doesn't work. The question is, I think the question the solution we often had is that the kids didn't learn it right. Well, did the kids not learn it right, or did you not teach it right? Because it's easy to keep going with it. I did this with, the other class and they loved it. Different class, different ecology, different time of day, different people in the group. When one student left, who I still know his name, but in my PhD was referred to as Coco the Clown. He would, and I say he because I taught boys, not always, but predominantly, especially in my early career. And when he was in the class, or when he wasn't in the class, it was a different experience. It's such an influence over everybody else. But we tried sport education, and some lessons went brilliantly. I've got reflections and comments on it where it just bowled me over, and then the next lesson it just went terribly. But did it go any more terribly than the lesson I'd had with them the previous term? No, it didn't. Went more terribly than the lesson before, and more terribly than the one that I was doing with year 9 or another another class in his group in his year. Because they weren't 6AB, they were 6CD, and they were brilliant. And well, in this case, it was actually 10, so year 10 class. And I think sometimes we know where it's not working. I can feed my year 7 class whatever I want, I guess. The reason I chose year 7 is by the time I'd finished 5 years later, that's all the PE they knew. Yeah. So they knew PE this way. And in fact, I had the opportunity to go back 2 years after I left the school and interview 2 classes that I taught as sixth formers, year 12 and 13. And the paper's called I Just Remember Rugby. The difference between what they could remember about PE in games and what they could remember about Mr. Casey's PE was just phenomenal. Yeah. And I know I was doing the interviews and there's issues and all that sort of stuff, but the level of detail that they could recall about what they did in cooperative learning and sport education and games making and everything else, to what they could remember. The paper is called I Just Remember Rugby because that was the answer to one of the questions. What did you do in games? Well, I just remembered rugby. What did you do? I don't know what we did, but I just remember playing rugby for 5 years.
Yeah. It goes back to that whole point, doesn't it, about everything builds on relationships, and those personal experiences, those memorable experiences are so important. What do you want them to be? What do you want?
Yeah, my daughter's PE teacher from a previous school had that relationship, and she might read this, and Maddie still talks about
Yeah.
You know, now I wouldn't want to comment on her teaching per se, but her connection with, you know, this young person was really good.
Yeah.
But
Go on.
is our connection as a PE teacher good with everybody? Now, I have this conversation, you know, Malcolm, you know, if I picked up your phone and we did a centre wall and I said, PE is the best subject ever, don't you agree? What responses would you get from your phone book? Which I suggest has probably got quite a few lovers of PE in it. It's also got some who didn't, and I suspect that you'd probably get lots of "you're having a laugh" as much as you'd go "absolutely," and that reflects what my experiences of PE are not the same of the experiences that I had, that my peers had. In fact, I went back to when my son, who's now 16, I went to an open day for a school a year at 11 when he was moving over transitioning, and I happened to sit down next to an old school friend of mine, and we got to the conversation, "What are you doing?" And you know, I teach teachers how to do PE. And I said, "Oh, that's really good. You always loved PE at school." I said, "Well, you didn't like it, did you?" He said, "No, I loved it, but because I wasn't you, because I didn't get into the team, I wasn't allowed to do it. I got all the second, third, fourth options. I never got to do what I wanted to do." And that was a kind of a, but we had the same teachers and we had the same school and we were in the same class, and yet your experiences of PE are very, very different to mine.
And memories of it as well. And that's
absolutely.
Perception is everything.
Years ago, I wrote about that we actually should have an anti-ableist PE curriculum. Now, I don't believe that now, but it was a kind of a, you know, what as if forgot about all the good kids. The ones who are in the community getting supported, parents are taken to this, who will do it regardless. Yeah. I actually thought about the others. Now, I don't think we should forget about them. So, but it was a real devil's advocate piece. It was like, you know, okay. I don't like the notion of ability anyway.
Well, I guess it's
similar to much talk about achievement. Who are the higher achieving students? Who are the lower achieving students? Or, you know, achievement to me is a process. It's changeable. It's dependent on the activity or subject that you're doing. Ability is a fixed thing, or too fixed. So yeah, you know, try to talk about ability, not ability, about achievement. You
know. So perhaps we should worry less about what the curriculum says and invest that time and energy in thinking about the perspectives and what people will take away from it that are perhaps the people that at the moment you're thinking they're not getting a positive experience from it. So how can it be more what it needs to be for them?
Yeah. But what does the curriculum say? I mean, it's written on the back of a stamp, really. I mean, and in some respects, for the most able teachers, the highest achieving teachers, to go for that, you know, the ones who are challenging and pushing and preparing to be brilliant and preparing to be not brilliant, garbage, or falling over flat on their faces and laughing it off and getting up and trying again, then that's great because they can interpret it. But for those who are, you know, quite happy to continue and maintain what they do, then it plays absolutely into their hands. You want a progressive curriculum, go to Australia.
Okay, so how's that different to here then? Is it more prescriptive?
I mean, I'm not familiar enough with it to kind of talk about, but you know, they've got lots of aspirations around social justice, about inclusion, around lots of issues around there, and it's not written on the back of a stamp.
It's perhaps loaded with a bit more purpose and
it is.
You can hang off.
Yeah, at the moment, our curriculum is you can hang anything off it. So it's either I guess it's an inch deep and a mile wide, isn't it? I mean, you can. You know, interestingly, the one thing we're supposed to do in national curriculum all the way through the key stages is dance. The one thing that never gets done beyond key stage 3, probably year 7 is dance, and certainly very rarely with the boys. Though it does. There are exceptions, and but
And does that reflect teacher confidence or student desire? And I'd say probably the first.
I'd say the first, because a good teacher will always drag you up, will always, in a good way, will always encourage you up, will, not drag you up, that's the wrong kind of expression. But you always remember a good teacher. There's always someone there to inspire you. One of my best teachers ever was my maths teacher in year 9. He was fantastic. He left, and my next maths teacher was a really nice bloke, but he didn't have the same connection with me. And there was a real loss to me in terms of how that happened. I think there's that real passion. I mean, one of my piece of advice for young teachers I work with is you've got a kid in your class who you can't deal with. You don't know, there's no connection. There's not, right. Find out who that kid does connect with, because there's somebody. It's a teaching assistant. It's the drama teacher. It's the secretary on the front door, at reception, and there is somebody in the school who connects with this person. Go into their lesson and watch them teach, and watch how they work with that person, and the investment in time and the way that they do it. Because if you want to learn about how to deal with individuals, don't teach yourself. Go and learn from somebody else who's already found a way. But what you'll also see is that person that you get on really well with doesn't get on with them. And that's the challenge when you have 30 in a class, I guess. But you can't have a persona that deals with everybody in the same way. You have to get that kind of nuanced understanding. And that means that every class is different, and that makes it harder.
And I guess on one hand, it's about being okay with that. And on the other hand, it's about being willing to, like you say, take yourself out of your comfort zone and try something different with the classes that aren't working, not try something different with the classes that you've already got in your hand. So
yeah,
nicely ties
equally, you can try something different with anybody. It will work, and it might work for 6 weeks, but at some point it won't.
Yeah, context.
I got asked. I can't remember. I was sure I was writing this down somewhere, but I got asked by somebody. I was doing cooperative learning with a group, and they'd done it for a year. We were moving it into another session, and one kid turned around to me and said, "Oh God, do we have to do this? We don't actually want to think in PE." And they were happy to do it to a certain amount, but there were certain slots where they didn't necessarily they wanted a break from it. Now, I didn't condone that, obviously, and we told them to shut up and get on with it, and trying to be aware that is a response.
Part of our role potentially is providing that space where it can, sometimes it's okay to just be about doing.
Yeah.
And so what about if you were in that tough circumstance at the moment, trying to deliver some PE from home? Any recommendations in that world? Ash, what would you be trying to do? Because it's very easy to deliver physical activity to someone at home, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, I think some of it's not trying to assume. So I could decide that, okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to learn a skill, and everyone's going to do the same skill, and we're going to go through to it. I think part of my challenge would be to try to get people to identify what they wanted to do. So, do you want to be physically active? Why do you want to be physically active? What do you what are your aspirations? Do you have goals and ambitions that you want to undertake? And how do you go about achieving those? And trying to motivate a year 7 or a year 11 is very, very different. I have a year 11, and trying to motivate him to do stuff is really hard. But when the gym was open, he would go every 4 or 5 times a week. He'd take himself down there and he'd use the equipment on the university, and he loved it, and he was really motivated. When he was playing rugby, he was really motivated. When he was playing cricket or could play cricket, he was really motivated. You can't do any of those things at the moment. Can't go to the gym. He can't play cricket. He can't play rugby. So it's very hard to get him to see areas that he might want to develop. And he's naturally, or has been up to this age, naturally quite slim, quite athletic. Can go for a run and not really. So he has all of those attributes. And to him, and he understands the physiology and the biomechanics, but it's not necessarily motivating. So trying to find ways to get him. Will he train with me? Will he do this? Will he do that? Well, he will to a point, but I do a lot of work on calisthenics, and he doesn't like that. Either because he can already do 25 pull-ups, or B, because actually he's 16 and he wants to lift weights, and he wants to do the stuff that he'd been learning to do. So to me, it's been a case of trying to work out what he wants to do. Well, he wants to play cricket, but he can't. He wants to play rugby, but he can't. He wants to go on the weights, but he can't. And you can't buy weightlifting equipment for love nor money at the moment,
Yeah.
There's a challenge, and I think it's understanding how those challenges are applying in each household, in each area. Will, I'd like you to do 6 laps around the garden. I don't have a garden. Well, what can you do? How can you do it? So I do think it's a real challenge, but I guess this is an opportunity to try to find out need and also expertise. Can you buddy up with someone? Can you work with someone? Can we get a training partner where you actually do what we're doing, but we do it in a garden? What happens if my Wi-Fi is rubbish? What happens if we used to live in a village in Yorkshire, and we were quite lucky in that we got fast broadband, and we were 50 meters away from the port that comes into the village. But even then, when there was 3 of us on the internet, sometimes we just wouldn't work.
There's none for the rest of the village.
Yeah. So how do you deal with those things? What if you haven't got a laptop? What if you haven't got this? I mean, these are real challenges, and I think this is a great opportunity for teachers for all of us to begin to understand the differences in what am I looking for? Infrastructure, I guess, within a household, within expectations, within whatever, and try to understand and find out ways of dealing with those, which can then help us as we move forwards when young people come back to school.
And I guess that's the last bit I wanted to ask you, was if you had one wish for PE going forwards, what would that one thing be? As a big question.
That we consider what we value. Because you ask teachers, PE teachers, what do you want from PE? What's your aspiration? And the term you hear is, I want kids to be physically active at life. I want lifelong participation. I want this, I want that. Well, if that's what you want, find a way of getting it, and focus on that. Now, if that is genuinely by playing football for 6 weeks once a year for 5 years, then play football once, for 6 weeks, once a year for 5 years. But if that's not the way of doing it, then actually think about what the way of doing it is. It's great, it's great to go out into the local community, play rugby on a Saturday and see half a dozen kids that you once taught playing rugby. It's really nice. I've done it. It's great. But what about the other, if there's 6 playing in one year group, and there's 60 in a year group, that's 10%. So what about the 90%? What do they do? Okay. Where are they? What, if you're not going to see them all, you're not going to keep, you're not going to keep track. I mean, talk about performance management. Imagine if your performance management was in 10 years' time, X percentage of your pupils must still be active. Like if you had that, the curriculum would change fairly quickly. But I guess to me, it's work out what you value and then find ways of helping as many young people as possible to achieve that.
That's brilliant. That's really helpful, Ash. And I really enjoy and value these conversations we have. If people want to try and pick up and engage with your thinking, your continued thought process, where can they find you?
Well, Twitter, not in my office at the moment.
Yeah.
Twitter's a good place to find me. I've got my blog. I've just started out putting out a series of kind of video tutorials or vlogs or whatever on cooperative learning. So, there's spaces there. I try to engage in, these discussions in conferences, in places.
Yeah. Just keep.
Sorry?
And keeping that conversation live, isn't it? And knowing that we're now at version 2.0 and how are we going to continue to evolve this rather than sit still?
Yeah. To me, a blog is something that has to happen regularly. And lots of these conversations are about dependability. If somebody knows you're going to be there, they don't have to read it all the time, but when they come back, there's X amount of stuff being done. Then, and that's what I find is that people don't read the blog or watch the video or read the paper or do whatever consistently. But they might suddenly go, I want to read that. And they go back and they find out that they haven't read it for 6 weeks and there's 6 contributions on there. So it's like, okay, this person's there and they're going to be there. And, and I think, to engage with the community, you have to engage. You have to talk to them. They have to talk to you. They have to feel that you are receptive to conversation. And I think that's what I try to do, really. I don't know if I always achieve it, but that's the aim.
You certainly always seem to want that two-way conversation. It's not about pouring knowledge or insight in, it's about entering into a conversation.
Absolutely. And I think it's, and sometimes you don't manage it. And there are times when people send you really good tweets or really good challenging questions and you forget to go back to them because of the busyness. Well, I'd say now it's not. Sometimes it's because you've challenged me so much I can't think of an answer. But other times it's that, I don't have time at the time to do it, and then it becomes more difficult, I guess.
And the stop is there, Ash. Thank you.
I mean, I think
sorry, say that again.
Just stop it there. Yeah, go for it. Good, because I've gone forever.
Thank you for your time.